Okay, excellent. Well, thank you, everybody. Welcome to the February 28th Board of Education meeting, last day of February. Just quick housekeeping. In accordance with the requirements of the Open Public Meeting Act, Chapter 231, PL 1975 announcement, I wish to announce that the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the school districts of the Chatham's Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, place thereof posted in the board administrative offices, sent to the clerks of the Chatham Borough, Chatham Township, the Library of the Chathams, the Chatham Courier, the Daily Record, the Star Ledger, and the TAP. Peter, would you mind taking attendance?
Sure. Ms. Ciccarelli, Ms. Clark, Mr. Del Sandro, Mr. Gilfillan, here. Ms. Kenny,
here.
Ms. Ross,
Here.
Mr. Ryan,
Here.
Mr. Smith, here. And Ms. Weber.
Here.
8 present and accounted for.
Thank you. If you're able, please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is today over by Peter. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody. On a rare occasion, I do have a few words. One of our students reminded me that it would be a good idea, obviously, to show, maybe just take a moment to support Ukraine, what's happening there, the suffering that's going on, particularly the children, in the south where they're being bombed. So if we could just take, a few seconds just to show our support for Ukraine and all the suffering and hope for a quick end to that. Thank you, Tommy, for the reminder. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate that. We have a packed agenda, so I'm going to throw it right over to Dr. LaSousa and get right to the business at hand. Mike, if you would take it away.
Thank you, Ms. Weber. The first order of business tonight is another presentation about school start times. This time, though, I won't be the one at the microphone giving the presentation. We have a very special guest with us. His name is Dr. Bert Mandelbaum. I first saw Dr. Mandelbaum give a presentation earlier this school year about the biology and physiology behind adolescents and their sleep needs and how that collides with school start times. And it was one of those presentations that sort of lit yet another fire under me after having lots of fires lit under me over the years about this issue. So I reached out to him. He's done work with Milburn Township Public Schools. He's the school physician at Montgomery and Hillsborough and North Brunswick. He is the chair of the Department of Pediatrics at Penn Medicine Princeton Health, and he was the chair of the New Jersey American Academy of Pediatrics Task Force on Adolescent Sleep and School Start Times. So I'm going to ask the board to go into the audience as usual, into the house, and I'll ask Dr. Mandelbaum to come up on stage, and then we'll take it from there.
Is there a PowerPoint or no?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, here it comes.
Here it comes.
Thank you. Oh, let's see. Do I have the clicker? Let's see.
I can always advance for you if I have to.
Yeah, it's a pain in the butt because there's a bunch of. Let's see. Yeah, sometimes they have a USB.
There you go.
There we go. Now, there you go. You got it. All right. All right. Well, thank you, Dr. LaSousa. Thank you to the Board of Ed. It's nice to be able to talk about something other than COVID for a moment. So I'm happy to kind of pivot back to a passion of mine. So I have a bunch of roles just to kind of give you some guidance on where I sit in this and why I'm talking in this space. So I have no vested interest other than the health and wellness of the teens. This is not a paid position. I am a pediatrician first and foremost, so I've been in practice for about 20 years or so. In 2010, I became the chair of pediatrics at Penn Medicine. And as part of that role, I started to have to look at what our transfers were. We looked at our ER volume, who stayed, who left, and we started to see, and I'll show you some slides, of what was happening with mental health. I'm sure you guys are seeing that. And so we were seeing a ton of kids, teens mostly, coming into our emergency room and having to be transferred out. So I'm practicing, I still practice full-time, and we're seeing on a kind of more system-wide scale what's happening to teens. In 2014, I was asked to be a school physician, and I then took on a few other districts. Once I was doing one, other districts asked. And it was that year, as I was reviewing the literature, one of the things that came out were a policy statement on adolescent sleep and when school start time should be. And Dr. LaSousa has talked to you about it. There's a guidance, 8:30. I'll talk to you about why. As a pediatrician, I've been in practice since 2001. I had never thought about this. Started talking to my friends, and I just saw it because it was a school-based health policy. I was invited later that year to talk at a county superintendent's conference to give a talk. And I had a lot of ideas. One of them, which was a throwaway, was, by the way, you should change school start times. Everyone says it, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the CDC. And all I got was resistance, which invigorated me to look into it, to understand what the problem was. Subsequent to that, I started researching, speaking in this space. I started a task force through the New Jersey AAP that now has almost every organization that's impacting health and education as part of it. The NJEA, the New Jersey PTA, the NJSIA. I am also the pediatrician who is the only pediatrician on the medical advisory committee to the NJSIA, because sports is super important to health and school start times impact sports. So let's talk. So again, the goal of this is really just to give you guys education. And I saw Dr. LaSousa's talk. There's no reason for me to be here. Everything that I say, he went over. Maybe I'm going to give more credence to it with a bunch of titles from a medical space. And I'll give you a little bit different background, but his talk was right on. So I'm going to bring awareness to this. I'm going to try to make this big connection. Sleep is super important. And the reason the kids are not sleeping, by and large, is because we're starting school too early, and that is having a ton of negative impact. And if you make that one policy change, you can make a huge difference to everyone. And there are no other things that I could find that is so easily available to all of you to do that will impact so many kids. Some a little, some a ton, but impact everyone positively. All right, so we're going to look at the history of all of this, the science, the mental health in adolescents, and then the expert opinions. And I'm going to fly through this because you've heard it before, but I'll answer questions once we're done. So when you're going to make changes, you always start by saying, well, why was it there in the first place? And one of the things to remember for any of you guys who have kids in high school, you probably went to high school late 80s, probably early 90s. So your experience was probably that you went to high school early, and then you assumed that that's just the way it always was, and that is not true. So early high school start times started for one reason. It was a transportation issue. So what typically happened, 40s, 50s, 60s, everyone started at 8:30 or 9. That was the high school start time. What do you think happened? School districts got bigger, and you have a busing problem. You can't get everyone there at one time, so you run, instead of one route, you run two routes, but you have to, one has to start earlier than the other. And then, do you guys have 3 routes here? And then you get big enough and you go to 3 routes and someone gets pegged to start early. Probably made sense to make the high school kids do it, right? It seemed like they look big, get them up early and whatever, gets them home the rest of the day. But that's where it came from. So if you look in Pennsylvania, there's a law in the books still that says if you're not starting school at 9 o'clock, you need to like tell the state and tell the state why, because that's when schools were supposed to start. So this was never about an education. This was always about transportation, and it was not in the one generation before. This was never happening. This is just a problem that started in the 70s, really into the 80s, going into the 90s, and by the 90s we started to have data looking at this. So, second thing to remember, for you guys who have teens, like, they're bigger than me, they look like adults, and we treat them like adults at times. The marijuana literature, I think, is helping people recognize, we talk about kids' brains not developing till 25. They are not adults. Their brains are still developing. This is probably the second most critical time in brain development through their life. Infancy and then adolescence. And what we know is that when I have 2 teens at home, occasionally, like, they're pleasant and really easy to talk to, and we talk about Ukraine, we talk about politics, and when they're with their friends or they're mad at me, they make terrible, terrible decisions, and this is what happens when they're tired. And then the third thing, and we'll show you the slides, but we know mental health issues have been on the rise. I am not pretending that this is the reason why they are on the rise. I am just saying that this is one potential solution to make things a little bit better. And I'll show you these. I'll show you this in a bit. All right, so background information. So sleep is critical. I trained late 90s, and for physician training, it was still crazy. Like, I got broken on sleep. So 24 to 28 hour shifts, you would do night float. And I remember priding myself and saying, I don't need sleep. I can go, I remember before working 24 hours in a PICU, being stressed and thinking I couldn't sleep. And so I didn't sleep the night leading into a 24-hour, and I was like, I never need sleep again. And that was clearly the wrong way to look at it. This is when the brain processes the information, right? So all that information you want the kids to take in, whether it's social, emotional learning, whether it's education, they're taking this information, they're processing it, and they need, it's quantity and quality, they need around 8 to 10 hours of sleep. We really think 9 and 9.25 hours of sleep. And there seems to be a tipping point at 8 hours. I don't know if you guys have surveyed it, but every high school, it's 6.25 hours. And we can go through the math of why that is. So they're not getting it because of what we're doing to them. So does it make a difference? I'm going to just tell you that anything you care about, not sleeping makes worse for these kids, and that when you flip it around, it makes it better. So in my long talks, I could talk about this forever. In my long talks, I'll show article after article about it. So learning, there's studies that look at 5 hours of sleep versus 9 hours of sleep, and then they look at retention. Like, what are we doing if not trying to get the kids to learn and remember the material? There was a significant decrease in the retention of material when they slept 5 hours versus 9 hours. Not a surprise, but the kids cannot remember it, even though they can regurgitate it the next day when they haven't slept. Mental health issues, so there is study after study of lack of sleep causes an increase in depression and increase in anxiety. And then there's a ton of studies on safety and automobile accidents. So when they look at counties that change school start times, there is a lower incidence of automobile accidents than parallel counties nearby that didn't change school start times. And that makes a significant difference in mortality. So they did, some of the calculations they do is they look at lives lost because of adolescent motor vehicle accidents because of lack of sleep, and how that changing school start times pays benefits to society over a long term. And they talk about things like in billions of dollars. Increased risk of obesity, heart disease, growth suppression. If anyone ever wants to look at a torture website, like do on the school's computer, not on your own computer, and you could Google it, the first thing that comes up, FBI shows, it's sleep deprivation. Because it hits every one of these things. So sleep deprivation is the first thing you do when you want to torture people. And because it has all of these deleterious effects. Heart disease, we're going to spring forward soon, right? It's a couple weeks. Or in the 24 hours after you spring forward, the ER data will say you lose an hour sleep. There'll be a 24% increase in heart attacks in that next 24 hours. Flip it back, fall backwards, get an hour of sleep, there's a 21% decrease in heart attacks. That's 1 hour. Then increased risk of impulsive behaviors, substance abuse, and sexual risk-taking. So there's data on all of this. Sleep-deprived teens, you're trying to figure out how to solve drug problems, besides the fact letting them out at noon or 2 o'clock when there's nobody around, when they're with their friends, is probably not the best thing for the kids. But better sleep, less substance abuse, and less sexual risk-taking. And then sports, again, I try to help advise the NJSIA. If we care about sports, there is a significantly decreased risk of injuries in kids who sleep well. And now you flip it around, and there's data actually to show the positive effects of everything reversed. So we have improved attendance, of course, we have improved tardiness, we have improved grades, moods, and you have improved athletic ability. And there's a ton of this. One of the talks I did recently for the NJSIA was with the Jets performance coordinator. So like you're talking about the NFL with $1 gazillion, putting somebody up there with me, and they're focusing on sleep to try to help professional athletes get better. Decreased mental health issues, decreased absenteeism, and decreased tardiness. All right, so why are they not going to sleep? So like, again, this is not, in the office today, I had a dad who was talking to me, and his kid was not going to sleep till 12, 1 o'clock, and he's 13. And I said, like, we're going to talk about why he can't go to sleep at 9. He doesn't need to go to sleep at 12 or 1. So there's a lot of reasons that they don't go to sleep early. Homework, right? Some of that is school's fault. Some of that is their fault. Activities, again, there's a lot of reasons why they're overscheduled. They have, and some of the, what are you going to do about a kid who's doing ice hockey or swimming, and the only time they get pool or ice time is at 11 o'clock at night? Like, I can't solve those problems. Social media, their phones, this is a huge issue. And then a lot of this wraps up into what we call poor sleep hygiene. So if they don't focus and learn how to go to sleep, get rid of their phones, get rid of electronics, wind down, get into a consistent bedtime routine, they could stay up till 1 o'clock in the morning. Like, I'm not pretending they can't. But if you do all of that right, there is no way that they can get to sleep early, and it's because of this. There is a biological shift in their circadian rhythms. And I'll show you a slide. These are the things that kind of change, that help guide you into when you sleep. And it's this shift that happens in puberty, somewhere 12 into 13 through 20 to 21, that makes it almost impossible for the little kids who went to sleep at 7:30, 8, and then 8:30. They cannot fall asleep before 10:30. It's like, for you guys, it's like 8 o'clock, in your body. Like, you might be tired, you're exhausted from the day, but you just can't get to sleep that early. Yet, there's only one reason that these teens wake up, and it's because you tell them to, right? It's when you decide to start the school. So let's talk about the sleep kind of physiology. Melatonin, you guys hear about this all the time because it's a hormone over the counter, and what it does is it's released from a part of the brain called the pineal gland. It helps regulate sleep, and so it gets you into this process where your body is tired, ready to go to sleep. Helps also regulate reproduction and breeding, which is why we think we see it in adolescents, because it happens in everyone. It happens in people worldwide, and it happens in other mammals. So typically what happens is once you hit teen years, there is this delay in the melatonin release. So it's not getting released till 10:30, 11, but it's no longer getting released at 8 p.m. And it continuing through the night. So like when I'm shaking my daughter at 6 a.m. trying to get her up, her body is physiologically trying to keep her asleep, right? So it's not just the amount of time. And this is super important. I promise you this is true. This is not a U.S. issue. This is not Chatham ruined your kids by giving them phones and they're up too late and just be a better parent. This happens worldwide. It's always happened, that there is this shift in their biology, and then it goes back. So these are not just young adults. By the 20s, they're back to normal. So telling these kids, suck it up, I get up early, get used to it, get off your phones, is just not going to work. It's not going to change their biology. So in general, the teens want to go to sleep 2 to 3 hours later. For some reason, it seems a little bit more with boys than girls. Like it's a little bit more of a phase shift. Left alone, no devices, everything else, probably 11 to 8 is what they would sleep. So this is what happens. You can see that is the phase shift. So, and again, this is, it'll revert back to normal, but this is what you're fighting against. So it's just, I promise this is the easiest speech I ever do. Like this, all the science is behind this. There is nobody in this space who is talking that the science is wrong. A lot of people who say too difficult, I don't care enough, or like it's a lot of other obstacles to overcome. But the science, the why we should do this, is there. So the American Academy of Pediatrics, like I said, that's what started me on this journey. The American Academy of Sleep Medicine, CDC, county health rankings, which supports every Department of Health in New Jersey, the National PTA, National Association of School Nurses, the New Jersey chapter of the AAP, that's really me saying that for here. And now, outside of the theory, let's look at the evidence. So again, this started in the 90s. They really started to get data. The last 10 years, there's just an abundance of data. So what they found is that there's studies that show all of these things happen. Improved grades, improved well-being, the decreased tardiness, accidents, mental health, substance abuse issues. There's one of the big things that people will talk about is that if you shift the school start time, will they just stay up later, right? You won't get anything out of it. And what you found is that for about every minute that you shift school start time, you get somewhere between a half a minute to a minute back. And if you guys do this, which I hope you do, you'd be remiss not to explain to the community why. That this is about your priorities, about health and well-being. You're doing this because sleep is important and because there's a physiologic shift. Because there is a responsibility of the kid and the family and the school to try to help the other things. So left alone, it would work somewhat, but if you explain to them that you're doing it to help them sleep and why sleep is important, that's when you'll maximize the amount of benefit you get out of this. And it's not just the kids. The teachers seem to be happier with a later school start time. Like they might like to, sometimes their schedules are different, they don't want to switch, but getting more sleep helps everybody, and teaching people who are awake in the morning makes a huge difference. California just passed this law, so they're implementing it this year. Senator Portantino was, so this is the first state to do this, and it was his baby. He championed this. So he ultimately, it was initially passed by the House and Senate. It was vetoed by Governor Brown, and then taken back. The California PTA the year after supported it, and it got passed. Basically, it said 8:30. They allowed middle school 8 o'clock. They allowed some exemptions, but this is the first state that did it. Pennsylvania, about 2 years ago, they had a bipartisan joint conference, and they call it the Joint State Government Commission. I just pulled some of the findings and recommendations. Again, to show this is not just science, these are the educators through the state. They basically say they agree that there's a public health crisis and chronic sleep loss. They agree that changing school start times are benefited by robust research. They agree that it is a biologically driven change, and that adapting the schedule to recognize this is responsible and what we should be doing. And then they said, don't just stop there. It's not just that there are other factors that you should really promote good sleep hygiene. So mental health, this is here for a lot of reasons, but really to drive home, this is what most people these days care about. And just to kind of show you how big a deal this is, that with COVID, we talk about layered mitigation strategies, right? This is one huge layered mitigation strategy that we can implement to make things better. So this is where I was when I started to really look. Remember, I started in 2014 thinking about this stuff. I had been watching the numbers increase. So this is we're at Princeton, our hospital. And so this is my ER data. And these are kids, teenagers, coming in with a kind of suicidal ideation, some sort of suicide attempt. So in 2008, we were 150. By the time I was like, man, this is a lot. We doubled, right? We're just almost about 300 in 2015. So I started talking about this, started looking at it, trying to figure out what to do better. 2018, I was like, let me just pause and see where we are. We're up to 500 kids. And I was like, this is just terrible. We have to do something about this. And by the way, our numbers kind of matched from a proportional basis what they were reporting nationwide. So then this came out 2 or 3 months ago, and I'll blow it up here. And so now when you're looking at the 2019 numbers, so I showed you what 2018 were, by the time you got to like a year into COVID, so there was a 25% increase for 5 to 11-year-olds, 31% for 12 to 17-year-olds, and for 12 to 17-year-old girls, a 50% increase. From that, that's where we are with COVID. So to think that we don't have to do something to try to help them, anything we're going to do is going to make things better. And I'm just going to show you some of these kind of articles on what mental health. So daytime sleepiness predicts future suicidal behavior in teens. Relationship between sleep and adolescent depression. Our findings add evidence that say that short sleep duration and depression are related. Association between risky sexual behavior during late adolescence. And just, by the way, like June 2019, April 2019, February 2019, we're not looking at like, I'm not pulling old data to show you guys. This is the risky sexual behavior, and look what they put in, like this is in the conclusion. In summary, this is just another thing that adds to what sleep disturbances do, including sexual risk-taking, multi-pronged strategies such as delaying school start times needed to reduce the epidemic of teen sleep problems, mitigate the impact of sleep problems on risk-taking behavior, including sexual risk-taking. Self-reported sleep, circadian rhythms, and drug use or substance abuse. This is May of 2021. Same thing. Our findings extend prior work. Eveningness and later sleep timing, shorter sleep duration are risk factors for future cannabis use and alcohol misuse. And then there's all the other things. So if you let them out early without supervision, what time do you guys get out? 2-ish, 2:30? You know, and then, so letting teens out, they're most impulsive when they're tired and they're with their friends. So leaving them in a place where they got nothing to do when there's no one around increases the opportunities for all of this. A year ago, I was invited to take part in this Stanford Summit, and this is probably the article now that is the best summation of all the research. So again, California was moving to this law that they're implementing now. So there on this paper are almost all the people who were really done the research and really raised the bar for sleep. I happened to was honored to like just be invited to attend to talk about what research we should be doing, what you should be looking at. And it just pulled together all the research, but this is all supporting everything we were talking about. So if you're ever looking for a one-stop shop summarizing the research, this is the paper. And Mike, I could send that to you to forward. All right, that's the why portion of it. So that's the science. That's easy. I'm going to flip through these quickly just to talk about where the obstacles were. So transportation, sports, families, and other activities. Transportation, this is the big one, right? This is what you guys have to figure out. This is a transportation problem. Sounds like you guys have an excellent solution, but that's all this is, right? If we're looking at the science and the health for the kids, this is a no-brainer. Figuring out the transportation is the biggest thing, because if you can figure that out, you're ahead of the game. Then you have sports. Remember, if you care about sports, decrease injury, better performance. For the athlete, that's all that this should be about. There is the obstacle of, well, you're playing Milburn or you're playing another district, and what time, and do you have lights? And really, you're talking about potentially often football in the fall, right? Most of the other things, they're indoors, or like you're really talking about when you have less sunlight outside. But these are all surmountable things, and there's lots of districts who have moved the school start times, and no one's ever given up sports. Pennsylvania, right before COVID, they had a school start time summit, multiple districts coming together, and the athletic directors were saying they switched to a later school start time, won a state division. That was their secret sauce, and they don't want to let it out to let other people know about it because the performance was better. So the adult decisions about figuring out how to do it, they're all surmountable. That should not be the reason not to do it. We can get into what some of the solutions are, but I think that that's not the kind of gist of this topic or this talk tonight. And here is, I think I love this slide. This is what sleep does for athletes. So, and there's studies like just highlighting, you have better three-point shooting ability, you have better eye-hand coordination, you have decreased reaction time, and lack of sleep, all the opposites. Professionals, I mean, I told you the Jets coach, but like there's baseball players, Tom Brady, like choose your athlete, LeBron James, the highest level athletes are focusing on sleep right now. And then you have all the other stakeholders. This is change. You know, people need to be in the room talking about how it's going to impact them. They need to be able to prepare for it. They need to understand why you're doing it. So what did we learn about COVID and school start times? You guys went virtual, right? Most of the time, most schools, when they went virtual, did you guys push back the time that you started school? And what we found was kids slept more. Now, they didn't have transportation there, but the kids, outside of all the downsides of virtual learning, what the kids will say is they felt better starting that first period. And the other thing we learned is you guys could do a ton of things in the blink of an eye. Right? It was a weekend in March that you guys pivoted from like full in-person to virtual learning almost without an issue. So to think that we can't solve this is silly. And then there's studies just to show that that outcome actually made a difference. So is it really worth the effort? I think from an education perspective, if you're looking at health, there's just a couple of things you could do. So, you know, you can educate. You can educate your students, faculty, families on health, on sleep, on other health issues. From a mental health perspective, when I've talked to schools, there was a lot of times that I think that they were missing early recognition, right? So teachers wouldn't talk, or they would see someone who was struggling and they wouldn't know what to say, and there was a potential that teachers, faculty, administration, they were there in the room where kids are spending most of the waking hours. They could have recognized it and done earlier referral, which would have potentially made a difference. But it's policy making, right? That's especially for the board. That's what you're here for. And this is a policy, I think, that benefits. There's not a student that doesn't benefit from this somewhat, right? And that's what your goal is. Prioritize goals. It's hard for me to think of anything, like if your goal should be, if there's something that is beneficial to the students, that has to become more important than if it's harder on other constituents, right? Like if I had to prioritize who we're going to help, you're here for the students. So whether the adults, everyone else, you take time, you explain, they'll adjust. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And I saw what you guys, I love your plan and what you're looking to do. I think it's awesome. And some school districts, my school district went from 7:20 to 7:45. So a 25-minute difference. They were able to do that without any real changes. They just were a little bit more efficient, and they asked me, should they? And I was like, go for it. That's 25 more minutes of sleep the kids get. I would love for them to get to 8:30, but I'll take whatever incremental change. Once you're at the 20-minute mark, it starts to make a difference. So I think as long as you're getting 20 minutes, the bigger the bang. Some people in this space will say, change is hard, and if you're going to go for it, go big. Like, do it and don't worry about it. But I will take any change rather than saying big change won't work. So what steps can you take? You guys know this. Just do something. Start there. To do nothing is really to do harm. I love this from Senator Portantino, and it basically is saying, like, this is like heat. There is just, we're not saying what time to start school. We're just saying there is a minimum. There is a floor that you should not be making kids get to school earlier than that. This is the task force. That's my email. If any of you guys want to send me hate email, just take a picture. You could send it. I used to end with this. It just takes a little bit of people, a few motivated people, but I think this is where I'm starting it now because it is hard, right? It is hard work to do, but it's worth doing. So I'll stop there and open to questions. You guys can come back up here.
Here, Chris, come on up. So
Yeah. Excellent question. And it does not, so napping does two things. So what it doesn't do is it doesn't give you restorative sleep, so it doesn't give you the same REM sleep to really help in terms of both processing and restorative energy. It does make you feel a little bit better. The other thing it does is it just breaks your sleep cycle. So the kids who are in that cycle, they're exhausted, they nap, they then can't go to sleep early, and they're back in it. So the sleep physicians will all say, get rid of the nap. A 20-minute power nap, if you need to, is fine. But that 20-minute power nap is just helping you feel a little bit better as you're getting through the day. It's not giving you any of the other benefits.
Can you turn my mic on? Thank you. Michelle, you want to start? Oh, sorry.
What do you recommend? I mean, I personally am in favor of this, and I'm excited that we're kind of getting to the point that we can make it happen. What do you recommend in terms of the ability for us to track, like, kind of our data? Like, how are we going to measure the success? And I know it's going to take time, and I believe your data is indicative that it works and it's effective. But again, it's going to be met with challenges. I feel like the first year of doing anything new, whether it's curriculum-based or anything, is tricky. So what do you recommend in your practices and what you've seen in districts in terms of data collection? And obviously our audience are the kids.
Yep.
And is it based on their feedback or what?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer a couple of things for you guys, different questions related to that. So the first thing, one of the things that drives me crazy is surveying people and asking opinions without giving education about it. And it's actually what the state did. So the state looked at this in 2016 and surveyed administrators and principals and just said, is this a problem? Do you think it's a problem? And they said, nah, it doesn't seem, like, they didn't give them any education that there's evidence that it's a problem. You just asked a bunch of adults who are living the life and said, does it seem to be a problem? So I wouldn't ask that. Mm-hmm. If you want to look at data, look at the quantity of sleep. But it's not just about quantity, because remember, even though we want them to get 9 hours, it's also the right 9 hours. Like that wake up time, like if you ever, someone wakes you up when you're not in the right frame of your sleep cycle, your day is just shot. Like you feel crummy. And so you want to try to get subjective evidence from the kids, how they feel, and so you can monitor how many hours they say they got. Trying to figure out, what time are they going to sleep? What time are they waking up? See if that improves. Monitor whether or not they subjectively say they feel better, because that's important for them. You can monitor absenteeism. You could totally monitor tardiness and see. Chatham's probably a high-achieving school district, and high-achieving school districts, it's harder to see bumps in a year in terms of an education. So I would not set your goals at that, saying I'm going to see better SAT scores, or we're going to have more kids accepted to Princeton because they slept a little bit more. Like that's not what you should be looking at. But you can get a sense, especially the first 2 periods, from your teachers about participation and how much the kids feel like they're learning in there. I think you have to start to trust these data. This is population-based data. So when I spoke to the state, there was a pilot that they were going to do. Nobody signed up for it. And when I had a conversation with Senator Cody, who was pushing the pilot, I had said, a pilot's just pushing this down the road 4 more years. Like, we don't need 4 years of data when there is a ton of data. So I'm not worried so much about Chatham gathering data. This is, you're going to do it, you do it because you know it'll work. You can look and see where you could tweak things, and on those things that we were talking about, the Stanford survey, you can use that to kind of, again, measure issues. But that's what I would be trying to measure, is the quantity of sleep and the subjective feeling of the students is what I would measure locally. One other thing, Seattle did this. If you really want to measure sleep, like if you wanted to do a study, you could do a Fitbit study, or and actually have them wear it before and afterwards. I wouldn't waste your time with that.
No. Thank you.
Dr. Mendelbaum, the list of positive effects are overwhelming. I mean, you listed mental health, grades, attendance, substance abuse, risky sexual behavior, decision-making, drug use, automobile accidents, which is what keeps me up at night, because we have so many kids walking around, even when our young drivers are driving, we have our whole student body is pretty much walking around town. So that frightens me. It almost sounds neglectful if we didn't do this. I mean, now we have so much information, and we're saying how good it would be to do this and how bad it is to stay in this state. It almost seems like it would be negligent. My question is, how quickly should we start focusing on the next tranche of our student body, our middle schoolers? Like, we're going to solve high schoolers, as you know, hopefully this fall. How urgent should we be thinking about that 11 to 13-year-old student?
I think medium urgency. I think the high school is really where, for a lot of reasons that you just said, and you're right, like you can't unknow this. Like, you can't not hear and recognize what you're doing. So, which is why it surprises me when people, I'm very proud of this Board of Ed for taking this on. And as I've talked, boards of eds, they change people, then they say, I want to rehear it, there's new blood on it. And so to have a Board of Ed motivated is awesome to do it. I am, as an aside, trying to get legislators, so we have a legislation being crafted by a legislator, because it is so hard for boards to do this individually. If we could get them to do it at a state level, that's just not happening quickly. And they're trying to get legislation passed is a big deal. So psyched that you're doing it, and I think that there's urgency for the high school kids. The middle school kids are what time? 7:40? Will they? They're 8.
Close to 8, but
Yeah.
a little bit shy of that.
I think you're okay with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't push. You can't solve all these problems, and
No.
those kids I think are okay.
Yeah, I was just trying to quantify how, quickly we should start worrying about the next tranche of students, so thank you.
I would solidify your high school, get that working, and then look and see what else you could do, but
Right.
I
And there's
think
also
you're okay.
some residents, obviously, that it impacts them at the lower grades.
Mm-hmm.
You're taking care of the high schoolers, but what about the younger kids? But even if your student's in first grade, in 8 short years, it could be your son or daughter that
Yeah.
this will benefit. So it's not quite fair to say, well, it doesn't impact my kid, because it will. It could be your kid that we're saving from that mental health or that of substance abuse or that risky behavior or poor decision making.
yeah, I'm talking at to the New Jersey PTA, not so in the near future. And I'm sure, like, anyone who's concerned about their young kids will turn into high school kids. Like, this is the
Quickly.
reason to support this. And if I had to create education from the ground up, I probably would have younger kids going earlier, the high school kids going later. I probably had less time in school and some combination of in school and virtual independent learning for high school students, but none of that is up to me. And so if we're dealing with a system that we have right now, I think the best bang for your buck is getting the high school kids in a good spot.
Okay, excellent. Matt, can you turn Matt's mic on, Nick?
I had this question for Mike when he spoke about this last time, and this is kind of like the easy side of the equation, which is once we get them to sleep, is keep them asleep. But where are we failing as a society or as a district or as parents from why they're not going to bed earlier? So to me, the pressures have changed dramatically in the last 20 years. The pressures from social media, the academic pressures, all these different items that keep people's brains flying until later hours than we did when we were kids. So there has to be, to me, two sides to this equation. One which is, allow them to sleep longer in the morning, but also how do we do a better job of easing the pressures that are keeping these kids up later at night? And I know, yes, you have the biological side of this thing, which I can fully understand, but I have to believe it's a lot larger than that in terms of, why they're staying up. It could be academic pressures, and they're taking, as I asked, too many APs, because they think they need 19 APs to get into a college. So is this the first step of an evolution in terms of what you from an academic and a medical perspective are looking at in terms of where we need to improve, and this is an easy step, and is there a next step in terms of evaluating what we need to do better to take pressures off these kids in order to allow them to wind down at an earlier hour, go to sleep at an earlier hour? So what is that? What's the evolution outside of just this process?
Matt, I think you're totally right. I mean, this is the easy step, right? This is a no-brainer science one, hard step for a board to implement, but it's an easy one in terms of one piece of it. But all the other things are more complicated, but real. Like, so, some of the therapists, we've become part of the mental health team, which we didn't really want to become. And as we speak to the therapist will say, summertime, their clientele becomes parents who are embarrassed to tell their friends what college their kid is going to. Like, that's how bad their pressure is. So how Chatham solves that, how New Jersey solves that, I think it's multifactorial. I think understanding what's important, understanding what the goal is of high school, somebody having parents. The pressures often don't come from you guys or the administrator or the teachers, right? Like in terms of APs, you guys are usually talking the kids down, but it's families who sit there and say, but this kid is taking it, you need to do more, or the colleges will say, you didn't take all the APs available to you. So the board can control certain things. I think you can control policies about homework, you could give breaks, you could, I don't know, your sports teams, I was complaining about this today. This is being recorded, right? One of our schools is going to Disney tomorrow, and they're not allowed, if you're a senior trip to Disney, if you play on a team, I'll leave the team out, and you're not allowed to go on the senior trip. They're not in season, so they're prioritizing, these are athletes that will never play again, who are not allowed to go, and the school, it's up to a coach, it's up to an athletic director, this is club sports, it's outside of school, so it is going to take a community to start piecing together its priorities for its children about what they want to see. And I think the Board of Education has a role in that, in saying no sports, no homework, no breaks, limit things, but that is a complicated one, but a piece of it. And that's why I said earlier on, you would be remiss to make this change without talking about the importance of sleep and saying, we're doing this for you. Here's guidance on how to go to sleep early. Here's when we think you should be doing. It's up to you as a kid, as a 17-year-old, to decide to do this. Up to you as a parent to talk to your kid. You can't go into their house. You can make policies, and you can't educate. I don't know if that answered it. Can't solve that one more than that.
Any other questions from the board? Go ahead, Michelle.
I just have one more. I think one takeaway that I had from your presentation is, and I know Dr. LaSouza and Dr. Chase, like maybe because we're here talking more about policy and speaking to the community, is reaching our target audience, which are our students, and giving them the information as to why. You're just not starting school later because, you're starting school later because this is why. And maybe we can embed some of this spring into our health curriculum and make sure that our kids understand the reasons why, and that there is science behind this, that we care about them, we're worried about them, and that we really believe that this is going to have a positive impact. And we want them to partner with us and go with us in a positive direction. And I'm not sure they truly understand the why. And so if you have any information that other districts have used to share with students, maybe we can get that, but I think our audience has to be the first buy-in, along with the rest of us.
So our task force is starting. There's a national Start School Later kind of organization, and our task force is starting to hit the teens on like Twitter and Instagram, and that's probably, as you get there, you should look to follow and get. Because that's where they're getting information. And let them get information that way, in a way that feels like it's not pedantic from, some adult who's telling them something else to do, but, in the way they learn everything, in memes of, whatever, so they could take it in parcels. But I would start to, intermittently send that out to them so they could start to embed it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Actual definitive reason why these kids are getting less sleep, is this most likely the sole reason? Or a good portion of it? As I grew up, we went to school at 8:30 in the morning in high school.
Right.
The only thing to keep me up awake at night was a little TV, and we watched The Odd Couple.
Yeah.
Honeymooners. That was it. We went to bed. It's midnight. You're out.
Yeah.
There was none of this.
For sure.
There was absolutely none.
For years, I've lectured with one of the principals on limiting social media, not giving a fifth grader a phone, like letting them have a life without that. So, and it's ubiquitous now, so everyone's going to have a phone. But you can, like, I remember telling people, don't put a TV in the room, right? That's out the window. And so, so yes, that's a huge piece of the puzzle. It's not going to get them to sleep earlier, but it's going to keep them up later. And their phone, imagine being a teenage girl or boy, and your phone is there, and somebody pings you, and you look at it, and it gets you upset. And it's 1 o'clock in the morning.
Runs around.
Yeah, you've got no protection from that.
Nope.
Yeah.
Right. Dr. Mandelbaum, I know you have an hour drive. I was wondering if you had time for 1 or 2 questions from the audience.
Yeah, sure.
Dr. Press, did you have a question? There's a mic right behind you, if you don't mind. I'll have to repeat it. It just won't get picked up. Bonnie, sorry about that.
Thank you. Actually, that was an excellent presentation. I was thoroughly impressed. My question is, you showed a slide that showed the circadian rhythm and the shift. Can you tell me, on average, when do we see the shift to the later in the brain, and then at what age do they revert back? And I'm thinking about middle schoolers, and I'm thinking about my children as they go to college, and should they not sign up for the first class in the morning?
Yeah, 13 to 21. So that's why middle school it's a concern, and the guidance from the AAP and the CDC say middle school, but it's around 13. It's not perfect, and it goes through about 21. So it is typically going through, this is why actually a lot of the kids in college do better. They generally are not doing early classes, and they're able to shift to a later schedule, but I would completely encourage any college kid to not take first morning classes. And it's probably hitting the middle school, but again, 8 o'clock is probably okay. If you just want to take a moment and see what it's like, so take Montgomery. If we're going to go really, like 7:20 high school start, that's what we were. You have to work backwards. And so when it was virtual and school starts at 7:20, you can get up at 7:15. You're in your house and you're there. So you have to factor in all the other things. So 7:20 high school start, I don't know if your guys' buses, but a lot of school districts will try to get the buses to show up at least 20 minutes before school start time so you can have free breakfast, right? If you need that. So now the buses have to get there at 7 o'clock. The routes are typically 45 to 50 minutes to make sure from the first house. So you have 7:20 start. You have a bus now that could theoretically be coming at 6:15, 6:10 in the morning. The bus stop is down the corner. You have to leave your house because the bus does not come on time at the same time. You can't miss the bus. So you get out there a couple minutes early. So you're leaving your house at 6 o'clock. I got up today. It took me I like to give myself an hour. I get up, I shower, I eat breakfast, I use the bathroom, I have a cup of coffee, and I'm an adult that knows how to manage my life. So if you're a teenager and you want to feel awake, you're now getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning to give yourself an hour to get out the door at 6. And so when you went to sleep at 11:30 or 12, because that's when they're often going to sleep, and they're getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, you're getting your 6.25 hours of sleep. And that 5 o'clock in the morning to that teenager feels like 3 o'clock in the morning to me. So I'm supposed to pick my sister-in-law up at the airport and get up at 3, and I just hired a car because I said I'm not doing it. I'm just too much going on my plate, because you feel terrible the rest of the day.
And the other is actually a comment, and that is to Mary's comment about educating and partnering with our students. I wonder if there is any interest in incorporating sleep hygiene into the health or phys ed program now, so that when we have to make that shift, I know sleep hygiene is something that's a lot more complex, and it's more than just, hey, making sure you get enough sleep at night. It's what do you do when you can't fall asleep, and how many of our students are rolling around in bed and don't know they need to get out of bed, and when they get out of bed, do they know that they can't go on their computers, and there are certain things that you can do to help you be successful when you get back to bed, and what you eat. I know my daughter, oh gosh, she's going to kill me. My daughter likes those Monster drinks, and I'm forever forbidding them, and then they happen. So there's their diet, the chocolate,
Yep.
the snacks, and I wondered if that's something that we might be able to find a section of in health now. When we make the change, we'll be ready.
I think it's a brilliant idea.
Excellent. Thank you. Is there anybody else that had a question for Dr. Mandelbaum? No? This was fantastic. Thank you so much. I can't thank you enough. And in case you get a little tired of wearing the orange and black, We just have a little gift for you here. You can wear your Chatham spirit wear down in Princeton. Thank you so
very
much.
much.
Drive safely, thank you. And it's not that we didn't believe Mike, but, you know, we do like your credibility. That was fantastic. Thank you so much. Dr. LaSousa, thank you for arranging that presentation. We'll post it on the website, you know, the presentation, not the video, not the PowerPoint. So did you have anything else that you wanted to add? As I said, it would almost seem neglectful if we didn't move forward. Now our goal is to make sure we give parents enough notice. So you said you had a few other things to work out. Where are we with that? User error.
Yeah, user error. I met with the leadership of the CEA right before the winter recess, and that discussion went very well, so we're working in that regard. And I'll continue to talk with the principals and the other administrators about some of the logistics. And then we, of course, will be working closely with the transportation department to make sure that we redesign the routes and we understand the timing of all of the routes and so on and so forth. But I agree with you, that was an excellent presentation. I think it's quite validating in terms of what we've been talking about. And I'm certainly ready to move forward. And if we can work out some of these other issues, we'd be on schedule to notify everyone either by the end of this month or early next month that
Okay.
this is the direction we're heading.
Okay, excellent. You know, the more time we can allow them to plan, the better. So, I mean, it certainly looks like, I don't think any board member objects to changing start times. So our direction is to move forward and provide notice as soon as possible.
Very good.
I think we need to also keep a section on our website and continually update information, start times, end times, transportation, childcare, everything that we know, and as soon as we know
Good
it,
idea.
so families know where to access that information, and then any relevant information that we think, links, whatever, that let's throw it up there so people are not just waiting to hear from us, that they can be proactive and get information as well.
Great idea.
Another question. I know the busing is probably the biggest issue with this. Is there a way, I mean, is there a way to share tiered busing with other school districts, or like a Catholic school like Oratory Prep or something like that, that might only have one route? You can maybe take their bus company and bring it on over, if that such a thing is possible. I don't know if you already do that or not. I have no idea.
We do some of that already, or at least First Student, which is our contractor. They have us matched with other districts
do? Okay.
that have different times. But this is a discussion actually that a number of superintendents are kind of pressing the state to come up with solutions around transportation, because transportation is so costly, and out-of-district transportation for special education students who are out-of-district is extremely costly. And there are a number of voices out there who would like at least a county-level type of process and system to help with the transportation issues, especially as we go into this budget with fuel costs
Right.
and everything else going up so much.
Excellent. And I believe there's, I'm looking at Dr. Chase, I think there's an opportunity here now to, you know, incorporate this into at least the high school curriculum. They're going to see a drastic change. I think there's a good opportunity to mention why. Your grades are going to improve, your performance is going to improve, you know, you're going to feel better. You know, we're not just switching the times because it helped our busing, we're switching the times because this is going to directly benefit you, and here's why. Maybe not 27 slides, but, you know, a slide, and even that one sports slide with the pros and cons, I think there's an opportunity to, you know, add that at least to the high school curriculum and possibly even the middle school curriculum, the benefits, you know, your three-point shooting will increase by 23%. They're in, the whole basketball team's in on that. So, you know, and I'm just looking at Dr. Chase as the, you know, to explore the opportunities to enhance the curriculum and explain why we're doing this.
Yeah, I think we have some of this already in the curriculum.
We do.
I don't know off the top of my head the HPE standards and the, you know, our various courses, but we definitely, there is definitely content about just self-management, rest,
Right.
that kind of thing. So we have to find out what we are doing right now, and I
Yeah.
agree the whole message about, you know, educating students, helping them get on board so that we fill out that other side of the equation is important.
Right, and throw the numbers at them. Your performance will increase by X. The Jets, focus on this. I think that, hits a little closer to home than just a dry, hey, this is really good for you. That will just fall on tin ears. Okay, great, thank you. Enough on that. I know we have an action-packed agenda. Did you have other
Yeah,
items,
just
Mike?
a couple of quick ones from me. So first off, on the agenda, there's just a slight tweak of the school calendar for this year to incorporate some delayed openings at the high school for standardized testing. This will be the first year that we give the new high school graduation assessment to our juniors, I think it is, but it's the new graduation assessment that's required to graduate for the class of 2023 to 2025. We do still have 3 snow days remaining. I know that this is the kiss of death, but timing-wise, I need to mention that only because...
This is where we have a snowstorm in March.
Yes, I know.
now.
The forecast looks good the rest of this week, though, and if we do have any snow days remaining, I'll remind everyone that our agreements call for them to be given back, so we usually then would extend the Memorial Day weekend. We've never been in a position where we've had 3. Maybe there will be a giant storm and we won't have 3, but if we do, we could consider, the day after Easter, for example, that's a Monday. We could consider trying to end school a day earlier to get off of graduation on Friday night. That, of course, would be a big question mark because it would entail changing project graduation and high school graduation at Menon Arena, so that is very iffy. But I'm just bringing it up to say that we've had a mild winter, knock wood, so far, and we will have to make some decisions probably at the March 21 board meeting about potential changes to the calendar to reflect the days that have to go back.
Okay. I can't remember a year where you said that and we didn't have a snowstorm, so thanks again for that.
You're welcome. And then the final one for me is just that there was a flurry of new guidance issued by the Department of Health in New Jersey last week, and then, of course, the CDC updates on Friday, and then some more, information for us from the state over the weekend. The long and short of it is that the masks, obviously, we all know, become optional March 7th. That now will align with school buses and transportation. They also will become optional as of March 7th. A lot of the other guidance from the Department of Health has really remained unchanged, which surprised a lot of folks. So we'll continue to take it into account, as we will take into account the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia guidelines. I was just talking to Dr. Mandelbaum before this meeting about that. And we'll, try to end the school year in the greatest amount of normalcy that we've had in a couple of years, and continue to consult with our local health department. I spoke with one of those officials today, and our school nurses will be, working through Karen Leister to ensure that we're being consistent and we're applying whatever guidance we're following in the most appropriate way.
Okay, excellent, fantastic. Anybody have any questions on those? I don't know if there's any advantage to keeping one of those 3 snow days in your pocket for maybe a mental health day in June, instead of having an 8-day Memorial Day weekend. It's up to the teachers, quite frankly, if that's beneficial, if they say no. Sometimes in June, things are spinning so fast that maybe we could take a day and just take a beat. But again, it's up to you and your staff.
One thing I just want to advocate for our students, especially our juniors, regarding the new mandated test. I feel like, just to dovetail on what Matt said, we're really trying to work in the same direction with our kids. The majority of our students take the PSAT, the SAT, or the ACT, which should be a graduation requirement. That's a nationally normed test. Our kids do well in those tests. I feel terribly to have these kids have to sit yet for one more standardized test just to check a box. I think we need to advocate for them. They don't have a voice in this. I know sometimes it doesn't get anywhere, but if we don't say anything, we can't hear no. So whatever you're hearing out there, and Dr. Chase, you too, in your networks, I think we have to speak loud and clear to the Department of Education. Our kids have not taken tests for 2020, and they're doing fine. These kids are doing fine.
It was actually even before that. We have advocated, of course, for this
Right.
for many years, and the Department of Education moved away from a single assessment and to multiple pathways,
Right.
both via PARC and then NJSLA, or a substitute like AccuPlacer or PSAT, SAT, ACT. But then there was a, you know, the DOE lost in court on whether or not it was constitutional to do that, because the law as written right now is that there needs to be a single graduation assessment to determine proficiency and meet the graduation requirement. So that's what the issue was. There was a lawsuit
What
filed, the
court?
DOE lost, and now they had to go back to implementing a single
So
test.
is it federal court? Is it New Jersey
No,
State Court?
New Jersey, because it's in 18A somewhere that there is a single proficiency assessment to determine high school graduation.
A shame.
We'll continue to advocate, though.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we do have one other very brief presentation tonight that will fall under Peter's section of the report. That's our auditor. So as soon as we turn it over to Peter, he'll move it there.
Okay, we'll move over to Peter, although it's going to be tough to follow Dr. Mendelbaum's presentation, but I imagine an auditor has an awful tough job bringing the house down
A
anyway.
CPA can always live up to the challenge, Joe.
Especially when he has good news to report.
Okay, good evening. Thank you for having me. My name is John Farina, and I'm from WIS. I was the director on the June 30th, 21 audit. I want to start off by thanking Chatham staff, led by Peter and Tatiana, and the entire business office staff for their cooperation during the audit. We spend a lot of time on the audit, and we actually started our interim field work back in June of 2021. We spent about a week out here, and then we resumed our audit again in September, and we were asking Peter questions up until February 23rd. The report was finalized on February 24th, and again, the most important part of any audit report is the opinion. Once again, Chatham had an unmodified opinion, which is the highest grade you could get on an audit. So congratulations on that. We are here a little bit later this year because we were waiting for information from the state on the post-employment benefits. The initial deadline for the audit was December 5th, got pushed back to February 5th, and then ultimately pushed back to March 15th, which you are well within the time frame for. And again, we didn't get that information until the last week of January. Some of the audit highlights, just very good financial position. The fund balance, when you look at the report, you will see that there was no excess fund balance generated this year, and that's purely a function of a change in the rules. The state increased the allowable percentage that you're allowed to keep in fund balance from 2% to 4% for fiscal years 21 and the 21-22 school year, which you're currently in right now. They increased it to 4% just to allow for a little more cushion due to the financial uncertainties of COVID. But that is scheduled to go back down to 2% as of June 2023. Even though you don't have excess, which you are required to budget next year, you'd still have the opportunity to use some of that 4% towards next year's budget. Let's see. Another good thing, you were able to deposit more money into the capital reserve for future capital needs of the district, so that's another good thing. And that's pretty much it. I just want to be brief and get good news like Peter said. And if anybody has any questions, I'll try to
Just
answer.
the usual question, John. Thank you, Peter, to you and your staff. You always do an excellent job and step up, and I know it's extremely time-consuming, so thank you again. John, any recommendations on, more best practices or something we should be doing?
No, one thing that they do really well in the business office is adapt. And, if anything new comes out, I mean, with COVID funding and everything like that, they were on top of it. And it's, they take the time to understand it and put procedures in place. So we can't really think of anything.
Okay. Matt, did you have anything?
No?
Excellent. Thank you, John.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. And I will acknowledge a lot of the good thanks goes to the business office staff who works diligently to follow all of the internal controls and the state guidelines. So thank you for recognizing them. and
Thank
all
you,
their
I
hard work.
appreciate that. That's great. Thank you, John. Drive safely, please.
Very briefly, not much on the construction report. We've started the planning for the summer project, so they're underway, and another bid is being awarded tonight, which is for 11 univents in the B wing of the high school, and that is funded through the state SDA grant, some ESSER money, and some ARP money. So that's basically no cost effect to the district. That's all I have unless there's any questions.
Love no cost. Did you say vents?
Univents, the univentilators.
Oh, okay, sorry. I had a hard time hearing that. Excellent. Any questions for Peter on any of those items? And again, Peter, we're on target. Summer projects, there's no supply chain issues. They have everything in a warehouse ready to go. We're not going to hear in June, oh gosh, I don't have the roofing stuff.
As of right now, I was told that the material for the middle school roof that was supposed to be last summer is under lock and key in a warehouse. They're ready to start June 20th. And everything else we're planning to do doesn't seem to be a supply chain issue.
Okay. And they're scheduled to start, the week or so after students are out of the building?
Everything is going to start, they've given the go-ahead to start Monday, June 20th.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Any questions for Peter? No? Excellent. We're going to go over to the committee reports. Personnel has not met. Ms. Ciccarelli is not here tonight, so personnel has not met. Michelle, are you able to move
Yeah.
the items when we get to them on personnel?
I will.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Kenny on curriculum?
It's
Oh, I'm sorry,
actually
Ms.
me.
Clark, sorry. I forgot you abdicated your responsibilities. Lotta.
Curriculum has not met. Both personnel and curriculum are meeting on March 9th.
Excellent. Perfect. Matt, over to you for finance and facilities.
We did meet on February the 9th, discussed a number of different things. Most importantly was the budget for next year. We basically gave kind of an inline guidance in terms of our cap, which is 2%, plus we had a little bit of a bank cap for 23 and 24, and then 24, 25 that we could potentially use. Our biggest issue right now was just our special education costs, which are growing faster than we would like, so we're evaluating those costs and how we manage them from an operating perspective going forward. We won't get our state budget figures now until March the 8th, which is that at one point we will then finalize what our budget looks like for next year. We walked through the capital budgets for this summer. We're basically taking about $2 million out of cap reserve in order to deal with some equipment issues as well as construction, which includes the nurses' restroom, ADA project, the Cougar Field track, partial replacements at middle school in Lafayette. We discussed the referendum, which we have sadly decided we had to put on hold. If you remember back when we first originally looked at this, we were looking at a cost of $8.5 million. Thank you to whoever. These are now almost close to double that. So it is very difficult for us to support at this day and age spending all of that money, putting that tax burden on our citizens. So we're kind of taking a step back. We have everything we want to do in mind. We just need to wait now and to see whether or not these costs come down as to we know that we can do this at more of an affordable level. We did speak about the skate park. We've had the skate park committee come to us and ask us about particular locations within the district to utilize for the skate park. Of course, the initial questions always come around to what is our potential liability. So we are addressing liabilities. We also told Mike and Pete that it's okay for them to continue to talk to this entity about potentially utilizing Board of Ed space for a skate park. JCP&L approached us about a couple of electric charging stations at the high school at no cost to the district. We always like things that are for free, so of course we'll take them if they're free. And last but not least was the audit, which we spoke to just now.
Excellent,
And
thank
we
you.
meet again right after the budget figures come out, the state budget figures come out, which is March 14th, I think.
Yes, Monday the 14th.
March 14th?
Yep.
mid-March, Matt?
We're gonna meet Monday, March 14th.
Okay, meet, sorry. Man,
That one may have to be by phone, but
having a hard time hearing tonight, sorry. Excellent. Any questions for Matt on any of those items, or Peter? Okay, very good. Mr. Ryan, over to you for policy and planning.
Yep. Policy met on the 9th as well. We have a couple of policies that are first, second, and third readings on the agenda tonight. That deals with the face coverings. So we kind of fast-tracked that a little bit. We revised the board member election and appointment policy, as well as the transgender student policy that we had to strengthen that a little bit. And we probably have about 12 other policies that are going to end up as first readings at the next meeting.
Okay. Okay, excellent. I'll ask my questions during policy. Does anybody else have any questions for Mike on any of those items? Okay. Very good. Are there any liaison reports? I do not have any either. Nope, all good here? Nothing? Perfect. Great, we're just going to...
Hold on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, Susan.
For CEF, I just wanted to announce a fundraiser that Chatham residents can participate in. It's called the Exxon Giving Pump. So if you visit the Chatham Exxon at 183 Main Street, anytime between April 1st and May 31st, and you fill up your tank at the giving pump that is designated, CEF will receive 1 penny per gallon. And the family that runs the is called the Wasim Petroleum Group, and they've promised a $5,000 minimum pledge. So please, consider using that gas station when you fill up your tank. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Susan.
You're welcome.
And just a reminder, the high school musical is Anastasia this year. And Maddie, it's March 23rd through the 26th? Yes. Fantastic. Thank you again for the reminder. So look online. All the tickets you can reserve your seat online. Look around, see which seat you like. My favorite are up in the corner there. So again, that's March 23rd through March 26th, Anastasia. Any other comments? No? Excellent. Okay, so for the February 7th meeting, I make a motion to pass the minutes of both the public and the executive session.
Second.
Melata seconded it. Peter, who was not present?
Full attendance.
Wow, the band was all here. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Nope.
Duly
Excellent.
noted, passes 8-0.
Excellent, very good, thank you. We have our first opportunity for public commentary. A hearing of the citizens during the public commentary section of the agenda is an opportunity for any member of the public to be heard about issues which are or are not on the schedule on the topic of the agenda. To help facilitate an orderly meeting and to permit all to be heard, speakers will be asked to limit their time to a reasonable length of time. And again, I'll try and take notes, but it's not a back and forth. We'll try and address any comments or questions at the end after we close the public commentary. So if you can limit it to 3 or 4 minutes, that would be great. Thank you.
Great. I'm Bonnie Press, president of Cpac, and I'm coming in under 60 seconds today. So Cpac is partnering with Emily Sortino, which I have to, as just a quick parenthetical comment, we love Emily. And we very much appreciate the board and Dr. LaSousa choosing her. That said, Cpac is partnering with Dr. Sortino on 2 upcoming events, and I wanted to get the word out that 2 of our counselors from Lafayette, Kelly Medvin and Cindy Weiner, are going to hold an executive function workshop in the Media Center at Lafayette on March 29th from 9:45 to 10:45, an opportunity for anybody that has concerns, questions, or wants to be a better executive functioner, we invite you to join. And second, that Caitlin Slight, the college and career counselor at our high school, is going to be presenting a program on post-secondary opportunities on the evening of April 18th. So if you look at the Cpac flyers or on the district website, you'll get more information about exactly where and when and any additional questions you may have. So the executive function workshop, and the post-secondary opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Press.
Hello, good evening. I'm Megan Simoni, a CHS special education teacher and CEA member, and I'm most likely not going to come in under 60 seconds, so if you need to cut me off, please feel free. I'm speaking here tonight to provide some CHS updates and recognize the amazing work of my dedicated colleagues. I'm going to start off, as I did last time, with a winter sports update. Listen for the word champions. Bowling, Morris County champions. Boys fencing, Morris County champions. Girls fencing, Morris County champions. Girls swimming, Morris County champions. Boys swimming, undefeated season, Morris County champions. Group 3 state champions. Fantastic job, winter coaches. To provide a little bit of background to some of the and extracurricular events going on, Eric Reha, Kira Spadaro, and Candy Hull here tonight are members of CHS's Visual Arts Department. They worked in tandem with their students to submit work in notable visual arts competitions. A record 10 students were recognized with honorable mentions in the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards competition. Additionally, 4 students received Silver Key Awards. Of special note, CHS senior Jasmine Lewin was selected as the Merit Award recipient in the Art Administrators of New Jersey Emerging Artists exhibition. Jasmine's work was chosen out of a large field of top high school artists in our state. Next up for the art department, preparing for the 2022 Teen Arts Expedition in the spring, and the long-awaited return of an in-person SDOC art show. Christina Reid, who you might remember as Christina McCabe prior to getting married, a member of the ELA department. She was the brainchild behind Chatham TEDx. She's at it again. She organized a guest speaker presentation from Montclair Film for her film criticism students. The class included a film screening, guest speaker-led Q&A about the film, and a discussion about film industry career opportunities. Elizabeth Wong, who was here earlier tonight, a member of CHS's math department, is volunteering her time to teach crocheting to students that are part of Crafts for Kindness, a club that creates homemade items such as knitted hats and scarves, which are then donated to local charities. Shannon Faulkner, another ELA department member, and Tori Van Wee, World Language, applied for a second CHS grant through Sustainable Jersey for Schools in conjunction with NJEA to acquire electric lawn care equipment so our maintainers can pilot the equipment to determine if a full shift to electric lawn care on SDOC facilities is a feasible option. And in working with Christina Reid, again, and Kristen Crawford, Shannon and Tori organized a climate countdown event in December, a week's worth of activities featuring TED Talks on climate issues, as well as guest speakers, including the owner of Jolie Cafe in New Vernon, who spoke about vegetarian eating, and the mayor of LBI's Beach Haven, who discussed the impact of sea level rise, climate change, and flooding on Jersey Shore communities.
Megan, if you could sum up, that would be swell.
Absolutely. I just have 2 thank yous. The first is to CHS's PTO that's been above and beyond generous this year, providing coffee, breakfast, cookies, cocoa at various points in the year. And my second thank you is to you, Dr. LaSousa, for inviting Dr. Mendelbaum to come and talk with us and providing his insightful, science-driven talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Megan.
Hello, everyone. I'm Candace Hall, member of Chatham High School's Art Department and a CEA representative. When I joined the CEA about 5 years ago, I was a building rep. That was not my lane. When I learned that NJA offered these grants called Pride and Fast grants, where we could provide great programming for families and students and members of our community, I said, yep, that's me, that's my lane. So that's what I've been doing for the past 4 years or so. I wanted to bring a couple things to your attention. Last month, right before break, Washington Avenue School students, second and third graders, participated in a mug painting and cocoa story night. It was a great undertaking, over 180 kids. I want to thank Eileen Teresi and Jacqueline Flanagan for doing a FAST grant and writing it. Working with the Ceramic Paint Place on Main Street, Woodland Bakery, the CEA feels like we're supporting the community as well as our families. Curl Up with Cocoa and Virtual Stories was a smashing success. Right before our February break, we did a food drive with Helping Hands. We had 50 bags of non-perishables, and CEA, with a Pride grant, contributed $1,000 worth of fresh food to that organization. In March, for Anastasia, we had to think outside the box because we haven't been able to have an in-person dining event for our senior citizens. So we are going to do a meal to go for our seniors from our Armenio's in a CEA insulated tote rather than the traditional sit-down meal. Okay, hats off. No more Pride, no more fast. I personally want to thank you for this week's February break. I'm certain you do not know the full impact it had on me and many of my colleagues, although I don't speak for them. It was at a critical moment when wellness and self-care were literally laughable. I thank you for the week that's already on next year's calendar, and hopefully when we return to some normalcy, that February week becomes a time for teachers and students and families to recharge and reconnect. Thank you so much. I know you only hear bad things very often, and I wanted to stand here as Candy Hull saying, you made a difference in my life last week. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mrs. Hall. Megan, do you mind emailing your thanks to Peter? He just doesn't write that fast. I got it all down, but you know.
Only one side of the page tonight, so. Good evening, Vanessa Uri, Chatham Borough, and as you may recall, we have one second grader and twins in AM kindergarten at Milton. Speaking before the board seems to have become a passion project of mine. As part of the discussion around later start times for the benefit of teenagers and upper grade levels, I am here tonight to give voice to the elementary school students in the district. There are numerous studies that suggest that the K through 3 grades are the foundation of and strong indicators for success at the high school level and beyond. A student's ability to meet grade level expectations in 3rd grade, in other words, by age 8, plays a significant role in the likelihood of them graduating high school. So while the board is looking at the impacts to teenagers in relation to school start times, what consideration is being given to the younger students? Especially as we are slowly moving out of the pandemic, is the board considering any surveys or assessments of where the elementary age students are with respect to their socio-emotional well-being as well as academic preparedness? And this is not to suggest any standardized testing, but rather objective surveys, breakout committees, curriculum reviews, community engagement, policy reviews, or even seeking feedback from the teachers and administrators who the students see every day about what they are seeing and what the needs are at the elementary level. I am not here to object to the changing of school start times, and I'm sure that when our children are teenagers, I will welcome that extra time in the mornings. And even my high school self from the 90s says thank you. As with my previous asks, I am trying to stay informed as a parent as to the best way to support our children's education, and given their age, I am currently focused on the elementary years. I think it is great that the board is considering the well-being and positive effects of earlier start times at the high school level. I just wonder if the same consideration is being given to the elementary and middle schools in the district, and the distinct needs of those age groups given what we have all collectively and individually experienced over the last few years. As the masks come off next week, does the district have a good grasp on what the needs of its students are going into the 2022-23 school year and beyond? What policies, staffing, and curriculum needs are being seen and what needs to be updated? It would be disappointing to find out years from now that the elementary age students needed support in specific areas, whether it be reading, math, access to enrichment, trustworthy adults, fresh air, or play-based learning, and not having given attention to those issues when it could have had made the most impact. Thank you for your time and consideration of my children and their peers as they continue to learn and grow into the future as well-rested, hopefully, high school students of tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Amira Bespiata, and I live in Chatham Township. I can understand and appreciate the changing of the start time for teenagers, but for young elementary age children who are awake at 6:30 a.m., if not earlier, I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around the change. Changing school times poses a problem for parents who work. As it is, a start time of 8:35 doesn't allow parents to get to work until after 9 at the earliest. This change to 8:55 would force parents to have to put kids in before care. This is also assuming that parents have access to or can afford before care. Before care costs $195 per month per child. I have 3 children, so this would cost me almost $6,000 for the school year, in addition to $13,000 for them to go to aftercare for the school year. Perhaps we should also consider how long of a day it is for a 6-year-old to be out of the house from 7 a.m. to 6:30 p.m., and as this is the latest that aftercare is open. So we are considering how teens are affected by sleep, but what about how young kids are affected by not being at home for 11 to 12 hours a day? So I ask you to consider not changing the start time for elementary students, or even making it earlier, as Dr. Mendelbaum suggested. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? No? There's a second opportunity. So we're going to close the public commentary. So thank you to the teachers for your comments tonight. I know you've had a long day, so don't feel bad if you want to sneak out the door. Dr. Mendelbaum talked about the benefits to the high schoolers, and I find it interesting because I understand your perspective from the K-3, but it's funny, the high school parents accuse us of focusing too much on the K-5, and the K-5s accuse us too much of focusing on the high school. So again, I get its perspective. The shift amounts to about 20 minutes for the younger students, which we were hoping to avoid, but it's unavoidable. There's no other way because of busing. We have to start it. We're doing the best we can with work-family connection. In Nirvana, if we had a complete control, we would have done a flip. We would have had the younger kids go earlier and the older kids go later. Milton doesn't have as much busing as the rest of the district, but we have to be cognizant of the full district. As far as assessments, I'm going to let Dr. LaSousa talk to that, but of course we keep just as much attention, if not more, on the K-3 and their progress and impacts and preparedness for the following year. And the teachers spend a tremendous, again, I'm going to stop and let Dr. LaSousa, this is more his wheelhouse, but the teachers really take a tremendous amount of time in transitioning year over year.
Sure. Well, on the start times, when you move the elementary earlier, then they get out earlier. So if a parent needs to be at work for a 10 or 11 or 12-hour stretch, it's really irrelevant when we run school because we're only running school 6 hours and 30 minutes. So if that's the window that a parent has to be at work, they're going to need before and after care really regardless of when we start and finish. But the busing issue requires us to separate the start and end times of the schools. So if we move the elementary times earlier as opposed to 20 minutes later, and I should say the 20-minute later, 8:55, 9 a.m., that's in line with a number of other districts. That's not that unusual to find an elementary school that begins the day at 8:50, 8:55, 9 a.m. If you move it earlier, that means the students are getting out at 2:20 or 2:30 or 2:45, whatever time it might be, and that just creates more pressure on the other end for working parents who might need to get home or make arrangements. And it would mean that the younger kids arrive home before their older siblings, so that if childcare is baked in through high school or middle school students taking care of younger siblings, that goes away if you start the day earlier. So nothing is perfect. Nothing is going to be perfect for everyone, but we think that these proposals that are in motion right now are better for a greater number of kids. In terms of K-5, we absolutely pay attention to our K-5 students. I'd like to point out that we were in the distinct minority of school districts last year that had our K-5 buildings open every single day of the school year for in-person learning. And the real differentiator there, what enabled us to do that, was the teachers who were willing to be in a classroom with 20-plus kids every single day before vaccines and before everything else, and the board that was willing to go there and make a commitment and prioritize the learning of our primary kids above some other considerations. Throughout that time, and this year too, of course we're gathering data on a daily basis. We're assessing students, our teachers are assessing students and working with them. We have administered surveys. Obviously at the 6-12 level, I've shared the sleep data in previous presentations, but we've done similar surveys, not quite to the same extent, at Lafayette and even K3 at one point last year, if I remember right, just gauging how students were feeling. And of course, we're working with our school counselors and our teachers at all of those levels to ensure that students are getting what they need and we're supporting them in any way that we can. Having said that, we've discussed that here in previous meetings. We did see earlier this year in particular more behavioral issues than we had been accustomed to seeing as students were returning for a longer school day and kind of emerging into a more normal routine. We have seen more mental health issues. We're struggling with those, as a lot of places are, and they're happening throughout our grade levels, particularly I'd say at the middle school, but really everywhere we're seeing behavioral and mental health challenges. So we'll continue to, to try to address that and do the best we can. But certainly we're paying as much attention to our younger learners as we are our older learners.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions or comments, additions? Nope, we're going to get over to, okay, we'll move over to the agenda. And again, if it appears we go through them quickly, these are posted on Friday and we've already had a chance to go through them and look at them. Michelle, in Ann's absence, do you mind moving the personnel items?
Sure. So I move action items 1 through 12 on the regular agenda with an audible correction on 1. The third individual, the SBS paraprofessional, the date should read 2/25/22 rather than 3/4/22. On the addendum, items 12 through 16. Any second? What's that?
Yeah.
Courtney Cox is leaving film to come teach.
I don't know. She's
What was your question?
she's working at Lafayette now.
Cox is no longer on Friends. She's teaching at Chatham.
Yes.
That's right.
At Lafayette. We're under paying.
Go ahead.
Do you want me to second?
Yes.
Yeah, that'd be
I
great.
second.
Peter Lotta seconded.
Okay.
Any questions for Michelle or anybody on personnel or Beth Grant, who loves questions? She hides in the audience in case everybody wonders why we're asking our director of HR. Okay, very good. Peter, would you mind?
Sure. Agenda items A1 to 12 with an adjustment to A1 and addendum items A12 to A16. Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Del Sandro?
Yes.
Mr. Gilfillan?
Yes.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Ms. Ross?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
Mr. Smith? And Ms. Weber?
Yes.
Agenda items pass 8-0.
Excellent, thank you. Mr. Gilfillan, would you move the finance and facility items?
So I'd like to move action items B1 to 19 on your regular agenda, and we're striking B20.
B20.
Mike seconded, Pete.
Got it.
Just a couple donations to say thank you for. One is a Nokia re-grant refund. Donation of $750 to be used towards the CHS robotics team registration fees, equipment, electronic, and expenses for the robotics program. And then secondly, a donation from the New Jersey Chinese Teachers Association to the Chatham High School for use, I assume at his discretion.
Excellent. Thank you, Matt. Any questions for Matt or Peter or anybody on finance? Okay, excellent. Peter?
Sure. Agenda items B1 through B19. Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Del Sandro?
Yes.
Mr. Gilfillan?
Yes.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Ms. Ross?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
Mr. Smith? Yes. And Ms. Weber?
Yes.
Agenda items pass 8-0.
Thank you, Peter. Back to you, Mrs. Clark, on curriculum.
Yep. I move curriculum items C1 through 4.
Excellent. Good to see student teachers back on the agenda. Weren't able to do that for a while. Can't really ask too many questions on the other items. The delayed opening mic is again just for the assessment, not just for, but because of the assessment that you spoke of?
As the standardized assessments at the end of the year, we still have to give NJSLA in certain areas.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? There you go.
Duly noted, pass. Agenda items C1 to 4 pass 8-0.
Excellent, thank you. Mr. Ryan, over to you for policy.
Yes, I'd like to move action items D1 through 3 on the regular agenda.
Chris seconded.
And Mike, the masks, this is, one of these is regarding the face coverings, the masks coming off next Monday, March 7th.
Yeah.
And then the board member election, I had sent you some minor edits or requests.
That'll go in the second reading.
That'll go in the second reading. Do you have any objections to just changing the order in which those 5 things appear? Okay.
No, that was
Oh,
fine.
okay, good. Okay, so that'll be it for second reading next meeting. Excellent. Does anybody have any questions for Mike on any of these items?
When we send out reminder communication regarding the procedures for returning to school with mask optional procedures, I think it would be a good idea to put this link to this policy for parents and families and students if they wish to link to the actual policy itself.
Okay, excellent. So again, mask optional, starting March 7th. Thank you, Mike. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? There you go.
Agenda items D1 to 3 pass 8-0.
Okay, we now have, moving over to the board business portion of the meeting. Dr. LaSousa, when are we going to start working on, I know budget season takes priority. After the budget is settled, are we going to start looking at sample calendars for not next year, but the year after?
Yes, I think we may have to do that even before the budget is completely settled,
Okay.
if we want to be out ahead. So we have started drafting potential calendars, and I can give them to you probably at the next meeting,
Okay.
a few options. And then I can talk about the August start time, too, at an upcoming meeting.
Okay, that'd be great. Yeah, the more notice, the better, obviously. So if we can get out ahead of the 23-24 calendar, that'd be great. Any other items for board business? Nope. We do not have an executive session, correct?
We do not.
Okay, excellent. Very good. We have our second opportunity for public commentary. There's nobody left. Wow. No? Mr. Heath, nothing? Okay. You're it, my friend. You're the sole survivor, Mr. Heath. Nothing? All right, thank you. Well, we're going to adjourn the meeting.